and welcome to this edition of the news. This is a special bulletin. Amid escalating humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, India is doing everything possible to facilitate and evacuate its citizens. In a recent effort, India evacuated its ambassador in Kabul and his Indian staff in a special Air Force flight, which landed in Gujarat's Jamnagar today. Indian Air Force C-17 aircraft brought 140 Indians from Kabul, including the last of the Indian embassy staff, Indo-Tibetan border police personnel and 4 media persons. The flight C-17 Globemaster was one of the 2 military aircraft operated by the Indian Air Force for the purpose of bringing home all Indian personnel from the embassy. And here's a tweet from the Ministry of Home Affairs reviewing visa provisions. In view of the current situation in Afghanistan, the ministry in a tweet said a new category of electronic visa called E-Emergency Ex-MISC visa introduced to fast-track visa applications for entry into India. So, the Air Force, the embassy staff from Afghanistan, from Kabul at Jamnagar, landed at Jamnagar this morning. So, they are back safe and sound amid the escalating crisis in Afghanistan. Earlier, the External Affairs Ministry had assured all Indians that all necessary steps would be taken in order to ensure that they are safe back home. And however, the External Affairs Ministry has also made it known that all concerned have been asked to provide information so that the ministry can have all necessary information. Also, a special Afghanistan cell phone number has been provided. It has been released. The number is 971-77-85379. And the email is meahelpdesk@gmail.com. External Affairs Minister added that India is in constant touch with the Sikh and Hindu community leaders in Kabul and their welfare will get priority attention. So, the Indian government closely monitoring the situation in Afghanistan along with countries around the world. The Indian government assuring all citizens in Afghanistan that they will be ensured a safe flight back home as and when the situation permits. Meanwhile, the ministry is seeking that all necessary information be provided to the ministry so that it can be aware of all details of all who are there and who wish to return home. Meanwhile, an Air Force flight, a C-17 Globemaster, arrived a short while back at Jamnagar, carrying the Indian ambassador in Kabul as well as his embassy staff. Meanwhile, military flights resumed at Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport after it was breached by civilians desperate to fly away from Afghanistan. A logistics specialist on the Pentagon's Joint Chiefs of Staff Major General Hank Taylor in a press brief told media that the airport reopened at 1935 GMT. He said a C-17 transport aircraft had landed with US Marines aboard and a second one loaded with an Army unit was to land soon to help establish security for the airport. Taylor added that by the end of the day, the United States expects nearly 3,500 total troops on the ground. The airport was shut down on Monday after crowds of civilians surged onto the runways.
We have approximately 2,500 troops that have moved into Kabul within the last 72 hours, and more will arrive soon. By the end of the day, we expect nearly 3,000 to 3,500 troops on the ground. First, for a real-time update, as of 15:35 local Eastern data time here, the airfield at HKI was open for operations. Shortly thereafter, the first C-17 landed with U.S. Marines on board, and the next C-17 is preparing to land as we speak.
And amidst the crisis, the United Nations Security Council held its second meeting on Afghanistan in 10 days. At the meeting, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres sent out a message of restraint to the Taliban. Speaking on the humanitarian crisis, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said UN humanitarians and their partners continue to deliver relief to more than 17,500 displaced in Kabul despite challenges from the Afghanistan crisis. The UN spokesperson said there has been an influx of people fleeing to Kabul and other large cities since July, seeking safety from the conflict and other threats.
Since July 1st, there's been an influx of people fleeing Kabul to Kabul and other large cities, seeking safety from the conflict and other threats. 17,500 newly internally displaced people have been identified in the past month, most of them arriving in recent days and have arrived from Ghazni and Logar provinces. Despite intense challenges, humanitarian organizations, both the UN and NGOs in Afghanistan, are committed to delivering aid and services to millions of people in need while adhering to humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. $1.3 billion humanitarian response plan for Afghanistan remains just 38% funded, leaving an almost $800 million shortfall.
U.S. President Joe Biden has strongly defended his decision to pull out troops from Afghanistan, saying the mission of the United States had never been nation building, as he blamed the Taliban's takeover of the country on the unwillingness of the Afghan army to fight the militant group. Striking a defiant tone, Biden said he stands squarely behind his decision to withdraw U.S. forces from Afghanistan. He said the mission in Afghanistan was solely for preventing terrorist attacks on American soil.
I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I will be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
President Biden warned the Taliban of swift and forceful response from the United States if they attacked American personnel or disrupted their operations in Afghanistan.
As we carry out this departure, we have made it clear to the Taliban, if they attack our personnel or disrupt our operation, the U.S. presence will be swift and the response will be swift and forceful. We will defend our people with devastating force if necessary.
World leaders have expressed dismay and concern over the chaotic scenes in the Afghan capital Kabul, with the Taliban now effectively taking control of the country. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that the developments in Afghanistan are bitter, dramatic and terrible. She added that efforts would be made to offer support and refuge, particularly for Afghan support staff who helped the German military. On Afghans fleeing from the Taliban to neighboring countries, Merkel said that Germany may need to evacuate as many as 10,000 people from Afghanistan. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said the country is prepared to continue to send military transport back to Kabul to carry on evacuating desperate Afghans in the coming weeks, but called the situation extremely fluid and exceedingly dangerous. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that Afghanistan must not become a safe haven for terrorists again. He said it is France's duty to protect those who help them, including interpreters, drivers, cooks and many others. He also expressed his concern and said they will set up an initiative with Germany and other European countries to build a robust, coordinated and united response without delay, which will involve the fight against irregular flows. And joining us now is our guest in a studio, analyst Anil Trigunayat, former senior diplomat. A very warm welcome to you, sir. And we'll be joined by other guests as well. But first of all, we also have with us Major General retired Dhruv C. Katoch. A warm welcome to you as well, Director, India Foundation. Well, first of all, coming to you, Anilji, when we talk about the situation in Afghanistan right now, how would you describe it?
Well, right now, the only word to describe it is chaotic. Totally, one does not know which way the things are going to go, and totally unpredictable at this stage. Only thing that gives you a bit of a solace is that the Taliban has tried to, especially in Kabul, tried to have some kind of a restraint. It has made the right kind of noises or the statements, including declaring an amnesty for all the Afghans who worked for the previous government or other forces. It is not hampering the evacuation of foreigners. In fact, it is protecting the Russian and the Chinese embassies and those who are staying behind. In the meantime, the Europeans and the Americans and everybody is trying to take their people out. India has already evacuated, and rightly so. So what I feel is that it is a mixed situation. It's only in a few days from now that we'll come to know. The Americans obviously have conveyed to the Taliban that they will be able to recognize them if they followed the certain guidelines and the principles which they had agreed to. For example, there'll be no terrorism, there will be no bloodshed, and then there will be respect for women and allowing them the freedom. But sometimes we become naive in the process, and I think that we need to watch carefully how Taliban actually delivers on those, and if they are in contrast to what it has always stood for, what kind of nation it wants, basically on the basis of Sharia and on the basis of the Islamic principles that it has always advocated. So are they in conflict with it? Yes, definitely. Now, to what extent it is going to...
Right, coming to Major General Dhruv Katoch. Well, Anilji just said, Major General, Taliban is showing some restraint. Your reactions?
No, I don't think Taliban is showing any restraint at all. The scenes which have come out from from Afghanistan, I have just received a video a short time back as to what they are doing with the women. They have already, on the streets itself, they have been firing at cars which didn't stop at a street light, at the street signal. So I don't think there is going to be any change as far as the Taliban behavior is concerned. They are a regressive force and they will remain a regressive force. For optics, they may try to put their spokespersons to say that we will have the rule of law and the life and property of all citizens will be protected. But on the ground, their action is different. And there are many factions within the Taliban. I don't think there is any one central authority which is controlling them. So I personally foresee very difficult times ahead for the Afghan people throughout Afghanistan. Rukma.
Right. Well, Anilji, if you're with us again, You were saying,
Yeah.
well, how would you react if I said, that the voices that are being expressed by various countries across the world, they are also a cause of concern. We are hearing voices of warning, we are hearing voices of appeal, we are hearing voices of dismay. What option do outside powers really have right now?
Well, the thing is that, when I say restraint, that does not mean that they are going to abide by. I very clearly said, I hope you heard that.
Yes.
The thing is that what Taliban is trying to do has become smarter in the bargain. They want to hold on to their principles because that is their basic fundamental tenet. It's not going to change at all. But at the same time, they know how to engage the international community. In the 1990s, they were supported by the United States, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and all that. Today, there are many large number of countries who are supporting them, and they have communication lines open with them. And very soon, we might see the difference. And that is why at the UN Security Council, everybody was talking about coming out with a voice in unison, that there should be a united voice, because there is none. The Chinese, the Saudis, everybody has started saying that, okay, it's their own choice. But everybody is worried about the terrorism aspect of it. Nobody is really too much worried, except probably Americans, Indians, and some others, that what will happen to the game.
We also have with us, right, Anilji, we'll be coming right back to you because there seems to be a problem in the connection there. Well, we also have with us Ramesh Ramachandran, our correspondent, who's with us on the phone line. Ramesh, you just heard what our guest said about the Taliban right now showing some restraint, but from your sources, what are you hearing about the current situation there in Afghanistan, in Kabul, for example?
Well, Rukma, just to bring our viewers up to speed with what is happening in Kabul as we speak, as you mentioned, things are going from bad to worse. People are in a state of despair. They are getting despondent, only because they are not being allowed or able to relocate themselves and their families and loved ones to a safer place, either within the country or outside the city or even outside to a safer destinations abroad. Now, that said, we have seen visuals again all over social media of Afghan locals storming the airport terminal in Kabul city, which, by the way, is still being guarded by American troops. They are an island inside Kabul city, which otherwise is now firmly in the hands of the Taliban. Now, that's just to take up on the point which our guests were talking about, Rukma, about restraint shown by Taliban so far. Well, Taliban has, to be honest, have not resorted to use of force within the city just yet, although we're getting reports of Taliban gunmen, Taliban soldiers going door to door and trying to hunt down people who allegedly worked with either the US government or the Afghan government. So we are getting reports of Taliban high-handedness, no doubt. But the fact remains that their ideology remains virulent, their worldview has not changed, their DNA remains the same as it was in 1996 when they came to power in Afghanistan. And we still don't have a clear idea, a fix on what they intend to do going forward. Will they choose to share power with other countries? Remember, last night, India time, the United Nations Security Council met in New York and they put out a statement afterwards asking the Taliban and other stakeholders to push for an inclusive, representative government that does justice to all ethnicities in Afghanistan. Remember, Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic society. It is a majority Pashtun society, but there are other ethnicities, namely Tajiks, Uzbeks, Shia Hazaras, including minorities such as Sikhs and Hindus. So it remains to be seen what the Taliban opts to do going forward. But as of now, we are told that they are in talks with the American generals in Kabul city as we speak to allow evacuation of all foreign personnel, including American diplomats and civilians, from Kabul to third countries in West Asia. And as I mentioned, we've been reporting here on DD India since morning that an aircraft, an Indian military aircraft, has landed in Gujarat, in Jamnagar, which ferried the Indian ambassador and others, including media persons from Kabul. They flew over Iranian airspace to make their way to India. And we're also told by the MEA and MHA both The MEA saying we have shut down the Indian embassy in Kabul for now, and the MHA on the other hand saying India, while taking care of evacuating its citizens, is also taking care to help Afghan nationals travel to India, and they are issuing e-visas to expedite their visa process. So all in all, India is in the thick of action and doing what it can under the circumstances to give succor, to give relief to the Afghan people who are bearing the brunt of the Taliban takeover. Rukma?
Right. India doing all it can, assuring its citizens that they will be ferried back to safety as soon as it's possible. Mr. Anil, when we talk about President Joe Biden's statement, he said that the United States was not in Afghanistan for nation building, for the purpose of nation building. It was to fight against terror. How do you read into this statement after 20 years? Mr. Anil, if you can hear me.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Please.
Now, what I'm saying is that it is true, because when they went in 2001 into Afghanistan, it was essentially to chasing the Al-Qaeda, and they got stuck in that. But in the meantime, their attention also was diverted when they intervened in Iraq. And therefore, they have been continuing to have various wars, fighting various wars. And they're at no stage, this has been their main concern, that the nation building would be their effort. That has been done by countries like India, which is much more contribution that we have made than many others. There, of course, they tried to create this army, which eventually abdicated its responsibility, and so did the leadership in which was invested, which had come from the United States. As you know, that Ashraf Ghani was a World Bank official, and he'd been totally supported, and now he's run away. There have been tremendous corruption under their supervision, and they did not create an army that could fight the Afghans like the Afghans do. I mean, they are basically the fighter people. But the way it has been brought up, it seems, and I'm sure the General Katoch would be able to bear me out, that what kind of an army they created was a clonish army that just did not rise to the occasion. I mean, that is something there. At the same time, the Taliban has been continuously fighting. They are battle ready. And so this is what has happened. But in the process, what has happened, since America was there, they stand for democracy, so-called, and rights of women and rights of children. They tried to give a dream to the Afghans that we would prefer that. They opened avenues for them. They showed various possibilities other than what Taliban's regressive regime had given during its 5 years of reign. So I think that it was, the Afghans started believing in that dream. And eventually then when they suddenly just abdicated the responsibility and virtually leaving everything and completely the Afghans to their own fate, I think that's where the biggest problem is. That they did not wait for the correct transition. They have been talking to the Taliban for a long time, and their own intelligence systems were totally failed as far as indicating the deadlines for various things. So suddenly this kind of a problem that we are seeing today. They thought, and they started trusting Pakistan a little more, and probably depending on the Pakistani intelligence to that extent, whereby the rest of the world also got carried away in the process. So I think that the US role in this whole thing, the US was not expected to be there forever. It was not there for charitable reasons. And therefore, if the Afghans or anybody else says that the US has just run away, I mean, that was supposed to be, that had to be there. I mean, it was an infructuous war. They launched, it had achieved no results whatsoever except for killing some Al-Qaeda people and all that. But they are going to come back with vehemence if the Taliban continues to be what it used to be at in 2001.
Right. Major General Katoch, as we do understand that Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic society, and the United States, as is said, it was only there to fight terror. We'd like to understand what the situation was over there till now. For example, which were the areas that the Taliban was dominating, and how was the United States army, foreign soldiers, how were they able to maintain that kind of human rights and protection and so on for all these years?
Rupa, can you hear me? My internet
Yes.
connection was a bit. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Please continue. Yes, Major General Katoch, if you can hear me. Well,
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can. Please continue. Well, we also have with us.
Indians are still there or stranded, and what are the plans to evacuate them?
So the number of Indian nationals, unfortunately, our Indian nationals do not register themselves. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Though we keep sending out advisories that, especially in countries like Afghanistan, where political situations can change, it is important that Indian citizens register themselves with the Indian embassies, so that in times like this we can extract them, whether or not they may be willing at that time, because sometimes they don't pay enough attention, they get complacent. So there are some individuals there. We know of at least I would say well, I know personally of at least 5 or 6, but there are, the figures are sometimes that are quoted to us is there could be 40 to 50, but that is not something that I will stand by officially, because we don't have it as a registered person on our database.
Yes.
What was the situation?
Well, visuals there of the just arrived Indian ambassador at Kabul. He returned, he was brought back in a C-17 Globemaster, an Indian Air Force plane. Meanwhile, the External Affairs Ministry has assured all Indians who wish to return home will be brought back. However, more information will be required for that, and as the Indian ambassador has just said, Indians rarely register themselves despite repeated advisories. Let's go across to Major General Katoch regarding this. Your comments on what the Indian ambassador just said. He said that we have requested, we are not even sure how many Indians there are, we have requested Indians in Afghanistan to get themselves registered. The importance of getting yourself registered following advisories here, sir.
Oh, I think if the Indians haven't got themselves registered, they have stepped on very, very
And Rameshji, well, we just heard from the Indian ambassador at Kabul, and he says that a major hurdle.
Indians are not, if they have not sort of registered themselves, I'm afraid they've gone very badly wrong.
Right. Ramesh.
Very difficult part of staff cater evacuation. So I think they may still try, but this problem I think is going to be take on a much more serious tone. Why?
Right. General Katoch will come back to you, but we now go across to our correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran. Ramesh, you just heard what the Indian ambassador had to say about what could be a major hurdle.
Indeed, Rukma, now this is a development that's fast changing sometimes.
And thank you, of course, to the Indian Air Force, who flew us out under conditions that are not normal, and of course is hosting us here after a long, tiresome journey. Thank you very much.
So can you throw some light at how many Indians are still there or stranded, and what are the plans to evacuate them?
So the number of Indian nationals, unfortunately, our Indian nationals do not register themselves. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Though we keep sending out advisories that, especially in countries like Afghanistan, where political situations can change, it is important that Indian citizens register themselves with the Indian embassies, so that in times like this we can extract them, whether or not they may be willing at that time, because sometimes they don't pay enough attention, they get complacent. So there are some individuals there. We know of at least, I would say, well, I know personally of at least 5 or 6, but there are, the figures are sometimes that are quoted to us is there could be 40 to 50, but that is not something that I will stand by officially because we don't have it as a registered person on our database.
Yes.
What was the situation? Was being monitored at the highest level on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis, and that is how the whole operation was actually conducted, involving from the junior-most person of the embassy to, let us say, the highest person of the government of India. Let's put it like that. It's not that we have abandoned the people of Afghanistan, that their welfare and our old relationship with them is very much in our mind. We will, going forward, try and continue our interaction with them. Of course, I cannot say in exactly what form and manner because the situation there is changing so much. We are also continually monitoring the situation there because there are still some Indian citizens who are there. That is why Air India will continue to run its commercial services to Kabul. That is, as long as the airport in Kabul functions. You would have heard that temporarily Air India had to suspend its commercial services. That was because of the conditions that were there in the airport, which did not allow for civilian aircrafts to come. The coverage of the situation in the airport itself is well known to everyone. It was reported internationally. However, we continue to ensure that anyone who is there is somehow brought here, for which the Ministry of External Affairs has opened a help desk which is operating already, and they are now going to, since we are no longer there in Kabul, they will now try and monitor the situation and the state of these various people who, some of whom did contact us but were too far away in areas that were no longer possible to access. But there are many others who continue to work in Kabul city despite the changing situation, and then have changed their minds subsequently and will be brought back when the commercial services begin. You cannot imagine how great it is to be back home. I tell you, after 2 weeks of very intense work, very complicated situation, having to take decisions and work in conditions that were very unusual, I'm very happy, and I think the whole mission is very happy that it's finally over, and that we are back home safely, securely, without any accidents or harm to any of our people. So, just for the members of the press, if you want to know the details, we were a very large mission. We are a mission of 192 personnel that were evacuated from Afghanistan literally within a period of 3 days in a very orderly fashion in 2 phases. In addition to our mission personnel, there are also people who work for public sector companies in Afghanistan. For example, we had people from the Air India who were also had to be evacuated because the conditions in Kabul city has become very complicated. Then there are, of course, a lot of Indian citizens who found themselves in distress because of the fast changing situation. So our policy was that anyone who reached the embassy was taken into the embassy. Well, I don't know how they managed inside the embassy, but we were sure that they were safe, secure, and there was an avenue for an exit. That was the general approach we followed. And we did this in 2 phases. We did this, and this would not have been possible without the work of the whole embassy. Different wings did different jobs. Some of the jobs I can't even mention, but it all came together. And we are finally here, safe and secure in front of you.
So, well, visuals there of the situation in Afghanistan. We are talking about how Afghanistan, which is in turmoil as the Taliban takes over after the withdrawal of US troops, and messages pouring in on social media about the fear, the sense of fear, the sense of apprehension, the sense of a disaster looming that people there, especially women, are coming up with, especially on social media. Ramesh Ramachandran now joins us. Ramesh, we were just listening to the Indian ambassador. He was talking about the major hurdle in tracking and bringing back Indians who may want to return home. Also, he thanked so many people. He also mentioned that the situation in Afghanistan is in Kabul is very complicated right now.
Indeed, Rukma, and one can imagine why it is complicated, because as we've seen ourselves over the last 3 days that since Taliban took over the capital city, things have only worsened in the city for the Afghan government, the local authorities, civilians, foreign nationals living and working in Kabul, and as you mentioned before, women and girls in particular, the local Afghan people who live in fear of what could happen to them going forward, because if the past is any indicator, the Taliban is capable of being true to form and going back to doing what they are good at. And if, as I mentioned, in 1996 when they came to power, stoning was common, public executions was common, suppression of women's rights was rampant, girls' education was, suffered a lot under their rule. So suppression of civil liberties and freedoms were the order of the day. So clearly a lot at stake for the Afghan people, women and children, as also countries in Afghanistan's neighborhood, including India, because if the Taliban does what they have in the past, one can expect them going forward to, take recourse to their ideology and possibly, go back to a stricter, narrower interpretation of Islamic law, or Sharia as they call it, and that would mean, more, right to be curbed for the local people, and that might cause, cause concern for a lot of many a world capital around the world. So that said, just to recap for the benefit of our viewers, Rukma, as you mentioned, the second Indian military aircraft has landed in Jamnagar, Gujarat, carrying the Indian ambassador Rudrendra Tandon and 140 other Indian personnel, including media persons and civilians. So we've seen that the Indian embassy has been shut down, has been closed in Kabul city for now. The Indians have been evacuated, but as the ambassador said, some Indian nationals might still remain in the city, and the government is trying to get them back, possibly by Air India commercial flights going forward, which will continue to fly between Kabul and New Delhi. But that said, I just wanted to highlight a couple of points here, Rukma, and 2 photographs come immediately to mind, and those are very telling. The first photograph was that of a C-17 US military aircraft carrying 160 odd people, all packed like sardines inside the aircraft. They were flown out of Kabul and taken to Qatar, and that is a sign, if you ask me, about the sign of despair that the Afghan people find themselves in, especially given the fact that a day ago we saw local Afghans on the tarmac of the Hamid Karzai International Airport, literally surrounding an American military aircraft about to take off, all in the hope that they could latch on to it and get on board, in the hope of leaving their country for good, at least for now. The second image came this morning, again from Kabul, Rukma, where we saw a private television channel called Tolo News actually resume its operations, and for a change, they insisted on fielding their lady anchors on live on the show this morning, and also holding discussions with Taliban representatives. So that to me is a telling commentary of the situation in Afghanistan obtaining today, especially in Kabul. There are still pockets of defiance, as I call them, especially Afghan media, who have held their own and are going about their business as usual. But things are changing, and changing fast on the ground, and one can only hope that the Afghan people are not penalized for the faults of some other officials or political leaders in Afghanistan.
Right. We also have with us Major General Dhruv Katoch, who's also analyzing the situation there in Afghanistan. Major General, you just heard what our correspondent Ramesh said about how the situation is continuously changing. Also, Twitter messages clearly reveal that there's a sense of apprehension. There's a sense of nobody knows what could happen next, judging from the Taliban's previous record. What do you think?
Rukma, I concur with everything which Ramesh has just spoken about. Now, when we are looking at the situation as we go ahead, there is great fear and apprehension as of now. And I think this fear and apprehension will continue perhaps for another a week, 10 days, or perhaps a month. But take it from me, after that, a resistance movement will start. Now, it has already been stated that one of the TV channels, they put their women anchors there. That is the sign of resistance. And I think slowly and steadily there will be resistance to the Taliban, and we are looking into a sort of a civilian conflict, a conflict developing. I think Afghanistan is in for a very, very long war now. A battle has been over, yes, but the war, in my opinion, has just started, and it is going to last on for a very, very long period of time. It is not going to be something which will disappear within a month or 2 months. You are looking at a period of 5 to 10 years where this resistance will continue till such time as the Taliban is thrown out. The Taliban does not enjoy popular support, that is one, but they have the gun with them. And how long that gun can be used to keep the people of Afghanistan under suppression is something we have to see. But I do hope that when the resistance starts, the world community goes and helps out those people. And we also need to, as of now, look out for the people of Afghanistan who are being terrorized, and see what succor we can give to them as of now. Rukma.
And Major General, what would you say about a head of state who abandons his country like that after 20 years of ruling a country, after 20 years of having grown up and to defend a country, an army that could not rise to the occasion?
Rukma, in my opinion, I think there was a complete failure of the political and military leadership. I think if the political leadership and the military leadership had stood up firmly, we would not have had this problem today. They had the capacity and the capability to fight it out, but psychologically they were defeated, and they were defeated before the first bullet was fired. I think the action of the Afghan president, the former Afghan president, to scoot the place, to run away, and with all the money at his disposal, I think that is a matter of shame, and I don't think he will ever be accepted back into Afghanistan again. I think as far as people like India, etc. are concerned, we should also have no dealings with such people who can leave their people to their fate. I think what the American president said was right. Ultimately, the Afghans have to fight their own battle. America can't do it for them. So this battle has to be fought by the Afghan people, and the people in Afghanistan who are fighting for freedom. I think all the democracies of the world, India included, we have to actually lend them a helping hand. This resistance, take it from me, will start. At the moment, people are in shock, but give it some time. There will be huge resistance to the Taliban, and then we will be looking at a totally different picture from what we are seeing now. Rukma.
Right, and a war against terror which went on for 20 years. We'll be coming to that. But Major General, when we talk as far as India is concerned, it's a great relief that, well, we just heard the Indian ambassador speak, and he said that, you know, commercial flights will continue. I did not really understand that. Could you interpret that for me?
You see, as of now, no commercial flights are permitted.
Right.
The airport is under the control of the United States. And they have said very clearly that only civilian, I beg your pardon, only military aircraft will be coming in, and that is for the evacuation purposes. I think what the ambassador was referring to was that once stability sets in, then the flights will resume. And once those flights resume, that means that obviously the Taliban will be in control. That is the time when the civilians, etc., who will be would want to leave Afghanistan, or the people who are coming from outside to Afghanistan, I think that travel will be opened and facilitated. But as of now, I don't see that happening, at least for the next few days.
And well, let's Major General will be coming back to you, but first let's once again listen in to what Ambassador to Afghanistan from India, Rudrendra Tandon had to say on his return and arrival in India.
It was very complex because, as you know, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan no longer exists, and the situation is quite fluid now. It's a lot to us to be back home, so your welcome really has an impact on all of us. And thank you, of course, to the Indian Air Force, who flew us out under conditions that are not normal, and of course is hosting us here after a long, tiresome journey.
Well, Indian Ambassador to Afghanistan, Rudrendra Tandon there, expressing his relief to be back along with the rest of his staff, and thanking the Indian Air Force as well as other members of the Indian government for flying them out of water in Afghanistan at such a critical time so safely. And going back to Major General Katoch, Major General, you were talking about the situation in Afghanistan, the sense of fear, the sense of apprehension. Well, we are talking here about a war on terror that went on for 20 years. The moment the United States moves out, their soldiers move out, the Taliban takes control. What went on for 20 years?
Rukma, in my opinion, I think the Afghan army, the Afghan army, they were absolutely adequately trained and equipped, and they should have fought. So I don't think the problem was at the ground level as far as the army was concerned. I think the problem was really at the leadership level, where some of the corps commanders, they actually switched sides, one, and number two, they just gave up. They just told the people to surrender. Now, there was no need for that. They had the capacity and the capability to hold on. But I think both the political leadership and the military leadership was very, very weak. The problem lay there at the upper level of the military and political leadership. I mean, Mr. Ghani, if he can abdicate his and just run away like that, that shows that he was prepared to run away for quite some time. It wasn't a spot decision which was taken. So he had given up the battle much, much earlier. And I think his, those vibes which he was generating politically, they also permeated to the military leadership. So I think it is not really a military failure at the ground level. It is a complete military failure at the leadership level and a complete political failure at the leadership level. That is my view.
Right. Ramesh Ramachandran and Sanjay Kulkarni also is joining us. Ramesh, when we talk about what General Katoch has said, a failure at the leadership at the highest level rather than on the ground, when would you say that it was apparent that the Taliban would be returning back to power, and this what would happen?
Well, Rukma, let me explain it this way. Now, as per the agreement reached between the US and the Taliban, the American troops were to exit Afghanistan by the 1st of May. Biden, after careful consideration, said we will pull out our troops by 11th September, which day he advanced to 31st August. But as we know now, Taliban overran Kabul a fortnight before that self-imposed US deadline of 31st August, and that, to my mind, speaks to the complete surrender, abdication, and abandonment that was on full display in Afghanistan. And remember, this even as the Americans were scrambling to evacuate, to complete evacuating their own diplomats and citizens from Kabul. That to me speaks volumes about the kind of alleged contingency planning that Biden spoke about in his address of the nation last night, India time. Rukma, we can come to that later. But the fact remains that between April and August, Taliban meticulously and carefully devised a strategy militarily on the ground, and General Katoch can throw some light on it. They began by focusing on the peripheries, on the peripheral towns and cities, before focusing on the population centers. And in the last 10 days, Rukma, we literally saw them overrun the entire country, starting from Kandahar down south, the Kandahar city, which was once their de facto capital in the late 1990s, which is the capital of the Kandahar province, known by the same name. Lashkargah in the adjoining Helmand province, Herat, the third largest city in Afghanistan, which is the capital of the Herat province, followed, and then the fourth largest city of Mazar-e-Sharif in the north following, and finally Jalalabad and Kabul. So systematically and meticulously, for a number of reasons, we could debate, whether the Americans surrender, gave up on the Afghan government and the army, but the Afghan army surrendered. Were they ill-fed, ill-trained? Were they ill-paid? Was corruption involved? We can debate on and on about these things. The fact remains that the districts and provinces fell like 9 pins, giving Taliban a free run of the place of the country. And today they have installed themselves a second time in 20 years. They were ousted in 2001 after the 2001 terror attacks in New York City, and they are back again in the saddle with the help of, as India called it, malign influences, namely countries in Afghanistan neighborhood that give nourishment, they give succor, sustenance to Taliban, and support the ideology. They give men, money, and material to Taliban, and we saw that in full display in Afghanistan today. And the Afghan people, unfortunately, are having to pay the price for those malign influences and their evil designs. Rukma.
Right, and as Antonio Guterres had said this morning, it breaks our hearts to see what is happening. With a heavy heart, we watch what is happening in Afghanistan. Well, let's once again listen to what Indian Ambassador to Afghanistan, Rudrendra Tandon, who just returned from Kabul there, what he had to say on his return.
Citizens who found themselves in distress because of the fast changing situation. So our policy was that anyone who reached the embassy was taken into the embassy. Well, I don't know how they managed inside the embassy, but we were sure that they were safe, secure, and there was an avenue for an exit. That was the general approach we followed. And we did this in 2 phases. We did this, and this would not have been possible without the work of the whole embassy. Different wings did different jobs. Some of the jobs I can't even mention, but it all came together, and we are finally here, safe and secure in front of you.
Well, Indian Ambassador to Afghanistan there, speaking to the press after his safe repatriation with the rest of his staff from the Indian Embassy there. Joining us here on the show is Sanjay Kulkarni, who is a foreign affairs analyst. Well, a very warm welcome to you, Kulkarni ji. You just heard what the Indian ambassador said. We take great pride that our Air Force was able to bring them back safely, from such a critical situation. Your comments?
No doubt. I look at it as something like a victory, and under circumstances the way that it is. And when you see the kind of situation that had happened at the airport, you see the kind of visuals coming from there. absolutely pathetic. I think our heart goes to the poor Afghani who is a real sufferer. Everybody seems to be claiming victory. Pakistan claiming victory, China claiming victory, Russia claiming victory. US also seems to be feeling happy to have left that country. But I think the poor Afghans are the ones who are suffering. And our heart really goes out to them. And definitely as Indians, we feel so close to the Afghanis. It's fantastic. It's a civilizational old relations that exist between the two nations. And what is happening there is absolutely something which one cannot even imagine. And at a time when we thought that the normal Afghani and the Afghani government had in fact been empowered with all kinds of equipment, and then to see to the way they've collapsed is something amazing. I can only say that at this point of time, it will be so much better that Taliban must go out of their way to be able to convince the people that they are there for them and that they did not fear of the Taliban or what they had seen from 1996 to 2001. But it doesn't seem to happen, because even the visuals I see coming from there on WhatsApp, the way they are treating the women, the way they are going about looking for people who are supporting the government, and select killings are on, that is all reflecting that the Taliban has not changed their mindset. And rightly so. Taliban cannot change their mindset. The very fact that Taliban is in power is indicative of only one thing, that they believe in having the Sharia, and they believe in having to follow the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, and for which entire Pakistan seems to be backing up. Their Prime Minister, their Foreign Minister seems to be the spokesperson for Taliban. You find the Chinese coming out and supporting it. The Russians are not hesitating to say that we would deal with them and that Ghani was responsible for whatever is happening. All this is indicative that the Taliban their morale is high, because they are not really worried about the recognition, because they have already been recognized. The Americans went into talking to them itself, gave them a feeling that they are the next rulers. The Russians acknowledging it, the Chinese calling for it and going along with it. Pakistanis training them, supporting it, leading it, and ensuring that Taliban is there in Afghanistan. And the poor Afghan citizen is the one who's suffering. But really, I must say, a heart goes out to them. Whatever it be, at least the poor man, look at the way they've come at the airport. I have not seen such a scene anywhere, not even at the worst of the bus station that you can see anywhere. Now, people are falling from the air. Can we imagine such a situation? What a scene it must be. What a fear instilled into the people of the very arrival of Taliban. Leave aside ruling. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, whether it is a joint government, Taliban government, or what is going to happen. The very fact that they are there is indicative of the fear that has been instilled into the people. And you can see for yourself what's happening in Afghanistan. It's really, really sad. But I'm glad at least we have been able to take out all our Indian citizens from there. The entire embassy staff has come back safe, except now, you can imagine, China, Russia, you have Turkey, Pakistan and Qatar. For them, the embassies are working full time, no problems whatsoever. What is this indicative of? That they have international support and they have the full backing of Pakistan. I would blame Pakistan for what is happening in Afghanistan today.
Right, the United States has made it clear that it was not in Afghanistan for nation building ever. And this the United States is saying after 20 long years of being there. We do understand that at the end of the day, as President Joe Biden has said, this is a war that the Afghans must fight themselves. Can we say that it's a failure of the Afghan leadership at the highest level, that the army did not rise to the occasion, neither did the elected government with Ashraf Ghani at its head?
No doubt. Poor leadership, lack of motivation, massive corruption, inability to take people along, no interaction whatsoever with the Pashtun population, just nothing. Entire support of the Americans, whether it is in terms of intelligence, or be it in terms of the air power, or be it in terms of the equipment, just the support of the foreigners to be able to keep the government in power. And a government which has come to rule, that is Ghani's government, which has come to rule with just about 1 point some million people voting out of a population of 33 million that exists in Afghanistan. And again, there also tremendous rivalry that existed between him and Abdullah. Look at the kind of thing, total lack of motivation. And again, I think it was the way he was trying to inspire and telling the people of Afghanistan, don't worry, we will be able to fight it out. I think people took his word, hoping that, yes, probably they did not fear. It didn't happen. He was lying. He was aware of what was going on over there at that point of time. And I think he should have been honest enough to be able to tell. And it is that, and not only the way the Taliban, when I say Taliban, let me be honest enough, they are Pathans, fully supported by Pakistan. And it is because even when you see Pathans as a population of almost 650 lakhs, 65 million, 40 odd million are in Pakistan. The balance are in Afghanistan. And they are all together. There is no difference whatsoever between the Pathan population. The Pathans believe in what they call as Pashtunwali code. They believe in honor, they believe in just their values, they don't care. It is not watan for them, it is biradari. And it is that biradari which they will do anything for. And this is what has happened. And which again, President Ghani then, who was a Pathan himself, American citizen also, I think particularly he should have been aware at how to handle the Pashtuns. He failed. I think he miserably failed in handling it. Poor leadership, I'll say, poor motivation, and at the very outset, the way the Americans also gave, dealing with Taliban a feeling that they are the ones in waiting to take over the power from Ghani. I think that also the battle was lost by the Afghan leadership. There was a total involvement, and also the morale of the Taliban had gone sky high. They knew that they are going to be coming to power. And if you look at it, yes, I think there was an understanding between the US government and Taliban. Not one American, not one NATO soldier has been injured since 2018 till date. And even now, when you see the kind of chaos at the airport, not one. What does this indicate? That there has been an understanding between Taliban and the United States that they would not harm any of these foreign soldiers, number one, and not even the embassies. That is one thing. But surely, America did its best to equip the Afghan National Army. The Afghan National Army, I would say, you can take the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And they have failed to live up to the expectations, and they have let their country down.
Right. Lieutenant General Kulkarni will be coming back to you, but let's listen in now to what our fellow men who just arrived from Kabul a short while back in Jamnagar in that C-17 Globemaster, what brought out from the war-torn country by Indian Air Force personnel, what they have to say on their return.
इंडिया में आने के बाद बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है। भारत सरकार का तो आभार है। थैंक यू सर। भारत सरकार का आभार मानेंगे आप सर। सर आपको यहाँ पे लाए गए हैं, हेल्प किया है, बहुत हेल्प किया है आप लोगों ने।
Sanjay Kulkarni, when we talk about the support for the Taliban, the way they are waving their weapons and well strutting there in those visuals that we can see, there is a sense that they do not enjoy the support of the local people. How do we interpret that from the visuals that we see?
See, even if you look at it, Kabul per se has about 20 to 25% population which is Pathans. The balance of the population in Kabul, which is an urban population, comprises of Tajiks, Hazaras and Uzbeks and all others. As a result of which, Kabul is supposed to be something, a metropolitan, which is forward-looking, had been influenced by the American stay there for almost 20 years, and therefore you find 50% of the Afghan population over there, which is post the American arrival there, and hence empowered, hence aware of what you can have pizzas, burgers, mobiles, and things, probably used to good living. At the same time, last 20 years, the Taliban, the rural Pashtun population has been radicalized, has been trained as terrorists in Pakistan madrasas. They have been trained to ensure that these foreigners have to be evicted from there. They have to fight it out. For them, it is nothing but the biradari. It is their values and it is a code of their own tribal code of conduct which they have to follow. As a result of which, I find that the rest of the urban population, which had actually got used to empowerment, women were free to move around, they worked, their education was picking up, universities were picking up, there was a lot of interaction, and suddenly we find that Taliban is known to keep women under house arrest. They are known to keeping women under burqas. They cannot even step out of their houses. Forget about putting anything on their face or cutting their hair or anything like that. They can't even step out onto the balconies or onto the terraces or move around all by themselves. Under these kind of circumstances where women are treated second rate, no education whatsoever, you can imagine the fear that would have come into these people's mind as to what would happen of them. For the last 20 years, they've been enjoying the freedom and actually interacting. If you see Kabul, what it was in 2001, you see the Kabul visuals, what it is in 2021, I think Kabul's turned out to be a beautiful country. As a result of which, I think the Taliban also realized that it would be better that they took Kabul without bloodshed. It would be better to take Kabul without destroying it, because they will never in next 100 years also be able to make Kabul the way the Kabul has been developed and money invested and the way it looks today. So with that as a backdrop, I think, yes, all others other than the Pashtuns probably are feeling totally insecure, because Hazaras are Shias. They are feeling very, very insecure. The Tajiks and the Uzbeks are feeling insecure. You see, Abdullah, mother was a Tajik, father was a Pathan. So all these kind of things you find, maybe Karzai may be able to, though he's a Pathan himself, be able to come along, and there may be some kind of a coalition government which is a need of the hour. If the Pashtuns feel that they are going to govern Afghanistan the way they had governed it 96, 2001, I think there will be tremendous amount of international pressure. But again, I may say what I may say, but they don't care for anybody's recognition or anybody's feelings. They do what their code, that is the Pashtun Wali code, tells them. And what better when you have countries like China, Russia, even Iran, Pakistan, Turkey trying to support them. They have everything what they want for. They cannot live on foreign aid, and that is for sure. They will not get the foreign aid if they continue to violate human rights.
Right, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, at the end of it, as you said, our heart goes out to the Afghan people. It is they who will suffer, the Afghan common man and woman there. Also, the world will now be faced with perhaps another refugee crisis, unfortunately.
You know, there is no denying the fact. It is surprising. It does surprise us a lot that even last time, when 96, 2001, the world had virtually kept quiet. They knew the Taliban had taken over. Yeah, some noises made here and there, and again it was back to square one. Had Taliban or Al-Qaeda supported by Taliban not done 9/11, probably Taliban would have continued till today. I have no doubt they would have continued till today. But the very fact they did what they did, and the Americans had to come there to ensure, to look after Osama bin Laden and take care of him. But what happened thereafter is, I think, there are noises coming. There is a kind of sympathy being shown. But I don't think the world community can actually influence Taliban the way they need to influence. And again, this is my personal feeling, that the senior leadership of Taliban, which has been interacting with US, Russia, Iran, China, and all over, who have been, like Akhundzada has been going, Baradar has been going, Mohammad Yusuf has been interacting, Haqqani networks are interacting with all these international conferences and seminars that they're attending since 2018. Maybe they would have realized it, that, well, there's a pressure that if they don't mend their ways, if they go the 18th century way, the international community will not help them continue to do what they're doing.
Right. When we talk about countries that are supporting the Taliban, their withdrawal would be the only of support would be the only way by which there can be hope in you know, a purely hypothetical question. But isn't that the best way to ensure that the situation gets resolved in something, in a better outcome for the Afghan people?
Absolutely, no doubt. until and unless everybody is on board. And today, but again, if you see, for the last 250 years, except for a small break where a Tajik ruled Afghanistan, it's always been the rule of Pathans. It has always been, right from Durrani, I would say the dynasty, it has always been the Pathans who've been ruling Afghanistan. But said and done, everybody were being taken together. Whereas now, you suddenly find this ethnic divide, linguistic divide, there's a Northern Alliance, which has virtually crumbled, all other massive corruption, nothing seems to be going. Yes, there's a hope in what you're saying. If that is translated on ground, that Pathans and the Pashtun leadership, which we call it Taliban, does not call itself Taliban, but Pashtun leadership, which without the influence of Pakistan, holds onto itself and carries the other ethnic groups along with them, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras and everybody, and ensures that the neighboring countries, they are not the originators of terrorism. They are not the ones who are allowing terrorists to flow from their country. And if that be so, let's hope that something worthwhile come out. But yes, past conduct does not sort of be able to give a feeling that Taliban is Taliban. For them, it's the Pashtunwali code. For them, women are second-rate citizens. For them, women are not to be educated. Much that they're making noises, we can allow women to go to schools and all what is going on. I don't think these are all crocodile tears and all kinds of ways to appeal to the people. It is back to Taliban rule, it is back to fundamentalism, it is back to radicalization, and countries like Pakistan will not let Afghanistan be governed in the manner which they would want it to be governed. It will be governed by the way Pakistan would want to dictate, the way the Chinese are going to make Pakistan involved. We as India have to be careful. We have to be vigilant. We have to ensure that nothing spills over on this side of our border. With that we can help. I think by all means, our good relations with Afghan people will sail us through in future. But our neighbors, we have got to be cautious about.
Right, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, when we talk about, the MEA is releasing a phone line, a helpline, so that Indians there can contact it. And the need now is to reach out to more and more Indians. But somebody who has had an experience of what the situation of Indians there is in Afghanistan, what would you suggest is the situation right now? We are talking here about members of the Hindu community, members of the Sikh community who are there, other Indians who have perhaps gone there to work, who have perhaps settled there. What can you tell us about the situation?
As I see, some good move by Taliban, because they seem to have gone to the Gurudwara, and the numbers being about, say, 500 odd Sikhs were there, another 200 Hindus which are there, maybe a few odd more Indians would have been left behind. And again, the assurance being given by the leadership, and especially Baradar coming on saying that we must now go the Islamic way, that's respecting people. If that situation prevails, I feel so, and the way it is looking and the way the ambassador has also spoken, of course they have gone through extreme hardship, but the very fact that they could all come to the airport, the very fact that they could board the flight when what the chaos was there at the airport in Afghanistan, and that they could come at a time when it is reported that 7 days the airspace is closed. Despite that, our aircrafts are able to go there, are able to evacuate the people from there. I think it speaks volumes of the Indian airport, speaks volumes of the Air India, which was flying till now, and now the airport is flying despite difficult conditions. I think we should be able to convey to our own people that if you can help and come to the airport, by all means, you will be brought back safe and sound. I think that's a very good thing, and not just the Indian. I'm sure if there is space in the aircraft for others to follow, they can also come. That should not be much of a big problem. But there is definitely a very good feeling. And also, I don't know whether it would be right on my part to say, Taliban, at this point of time, I am not going to say a word, but yes, probably they are wanting to show to the world their humane face by allowing these kind of things to happen. But the leadership may be saying something, but on ground, to be able to move from place A to place B without being interjected by these Taliban fighters, without being extortion or without being killed. I think that is what we need to be concerned about. If they can get to the airport, by all means, I think the way the Indian government has made arrangements for the people to come to India, I think we must give full credit to the Indian Air Force and full credit to the government of India to be able to ensure that such a thing is happening even under the most difficult conditions that are prevailing today, when so many foreign countries are unable to get their citizens out of Afghanistan.
Right, and already the Ministry of Home Affairs has reviewed visa provisions in view of the current situation in Afghanistan. The ministry also has fast-tracked visa applications for entry into India with a new e-visa format. And earlier there was a full assurance that all Indians who want to return home will be repatriated back. So, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, we'd like a final word from you. We've come to the final stage of the program. The situation in Afghanistan is continuously changing, but one thing is very clear, that Taliban clearly are here to stay unless the United States perhaps acts, but those are outside powers. As President Biden has said, it is the Afghan people who will have to fight this war. How do you see this, just very vaguely, how do you see the situation panning out from here?
See, we'll have to wait and watch, number one. Number two, I think what the US president is saying, I would go along with him. It is obviously the Afghan government had been empowered. For 20 years, they've been assisted. They've invested over $2 trillion in Afghanistan. They've gone about developing it. They've trained them, equipped them, given them the best of equipment, given them the best of training. If they were not to rise to the occasion and be able to save their own country, obviously, then they are the ones who will have bound to suffer. So therefore, it's most essential that people of Afghanistan, doesn't matter. See, they all are Muslims. First and foremost, they all are Muslims. And therefore, they must all stand together. And they should be able to ensure that there is democracy prevailing. And since there's an ethnic divide, linguistic divide, but religion being one, it does not really matter whether he's a Tajik, whether it is a Hazara, he's an Uzbek or a Pathan. The Pathans have been there for 250 years ruling Afghanistan. Such a situation has never cropped up. I have never seen a situation in any country from where the people are falling down from the aircraft from the sky. Can you imagine such a situation ever? I think the Afghan people themselves will have to now think, ponder over, and all the jirgas and all the kinds of people, they sit together. They must work out a policy that it is in the interest of Afghanistan that they must be seen to be united. Otherwise, Afghanistan by itself is, I don't think, other than narcotics and other than a few minerals, that it can really exist. The population today is 33 to 39 million people, and so many of equal numbers are sitting in Pakistan who otherwise are Pathans of Afghanistan. So there's a huge population with nothing that grows over there, nothing much that can happen. They have to depend on foreign aid, and therefore a good image of theirs will attract foreign investment, people will come out and help them irrespective of the situation over there. But if they go back to 18th century, ill-treating women, ill-treating children, ill-treating people, killing people on I don't think Afghan kids have a bright future. And what with the support of a country like Pakistan, which is using terrorism as an instrument of state policy, Afghanistan is destined to be ruined.
Right. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, thank you so much for joining us there and for your inputs as you analyze the situation and put in those bits that we could not really grasp. Well, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the news of this special bulletin on the Afghanistan crisis. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.